That would be amazing if like Barbara Broccoli was like, I sat down and watched this movie called Meet the Feebles, and welcome to Gold, Diamonds, and Death, a James Bond podcast. I am your 00 host, Jonathan Watkins. I'm a writer for all things under the Cinemasins brand name and a co-host of the Behind the Scenes podcast. Joining me each and every week for this endeavor, he's the co-founder of Cinemasins, co-host of the weekly podcast Recotopia. He also loves when Christmas comes more than once a year.
Yes, I do.
And he's also one of my good friends, Mr. Chris Atkinson. How are you doing?
Doing great.
After I wrote that little thing about the Christmas, because I think I'm right. You're not a huge Christmas fan, right? So I thought that was extra funny.
Yeah, I don't actually like the holiday very, very much. But I'm kind of an old fuddy-duddy that way, I guess. I don't know. I don't like generally like anything that I don't like ceremonies, and I don't like, I don't like.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that too. I don't like things that like stop the course of like a regular week or whatever. It's kind of weird. I mean, I like Christmas more when I had a kid. That's become a little more fun. Just all that, but like Easter really irritates me. My wife thinks I have like some like deep buried incident that happened to me around Easter, because like I just really can't stand Easter. Like I get irritated. Like, yeah, it's like, why does this have? Why can't we just go eat dinner with your family last week? Why's it got to be this day? Why are I don't know. It's so dumb. I can't explain it, but I just get I
don't know. It feels like an imposition.
I haven't even said that what we're talking about, so you probably got a clue. We're talking about 1999's The World Is Not Enough. And let's just dive into it. Our first segment is something we like to call Eon Flux.
This is a journey.
I'm gonna make a movie!
We have to go back, Kate.
Wow, how did you know all that stuff?
I did my research.
I don't understand any of this.
What the fuck is going on?
We are going to scour through the history of Eon Productions and give you all the highs and lows that went into the making of these films. This was a pretty like easygoing shoot from everything I can read. So I don't know if there's a lot of exciting stories, but there's still some stuff that happened.
Yeah.
The basics of this, it's the 19th film in the official franchise, the third with Brosnan, and second to last, at least as of 2023. The title is the translation of the motto scene on the Bond family coat of arms, which is first seen in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's also mentioned a bunch in a lot of the books. So, and there was actually some other titles that they tried to, but we'll talk about that when we get to that part. But anyways, this was the first official Bond film to not have United Artists logo at the start of it. From here on out, it's just going to be the standard MGM. We talked about that a little bit last week about them selling the company and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Last Bond film to be released in the 20th century, and the last Bond film to be released before the 9/11 attacks. So this is our last pre 9/11 Bond. I don't really know. It was so much after that they made Casino Royale, though I don't know how much the post 9/11 really factored in. But I thought I'd make note of it here, and we might be talking about that more next week. It premiered on November 19th, 1999 in the U.S. and on November 26th in the U.K. Its world premiere was on November 8th in Los Angeles. So here's another one that didn't actually have its premiere in the U.K. It earned $35.5 million in its opening weekend in the U.S. It ended up with $126 million domestic, which actually it wasn't really a hit here. I mean, it made money, but it was like $125 million budget.
Mm-hmm.
Now it made 361 worldwide, so I mean it's still obviously
it ended up doing okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a dud or anything. It finished 14th at the U.S. box office. It made about $4 million less than American Beauty. It made around $10 million more than Double Jeopardy. Totally forgot how big of a hit Double Jeopardy was.
Wow, I didn't remember that making that much either.
Yeah, it made like 120 116 million, I guess, is what it made.
And this one also, when I was going through the trivia, it was like, this is the most any Bond movie made in the 20th century. And I was like, well, yeah, but it can't be as profitable as a lot of these that came out. So it definitely grossed the most, but it also, you talk about $125 million budget. That budget is, they've really blown Bond budgets out sky high since the 80s and whatever. And there were different circumstances around all of that, but obviously a far cry from the 60s when they were making these things like independent features.
And even
almost.
GoldenEye was like 60 or 70 million. So I mean, like as far as I mean, obviously with whatever you call it, with inflation, I mean, I'm sure some of the budgets would be in the 100 millions today, but like, I mean, I guess Tomorrow Never Dies was the first one that was like 100 million, which is, I didn't even think about that. We were talking about it. And then they're going to get crazier from here. But box office gets so stupid around the time Casino Royale comes out. Like, I don't even know what box office means anymore. I can't keep up, and I don't care. But I mention it because a lot of people seem to like to talk about that. So, cast. So we got Brosnan's back for the third time. Then we've got interesting cast. Sophie Marceau, who was at that time, I guess, known to U.S. audiences for Braveheart. For some reason, I thought she was in Dangerous Beauty too, but that was like Catherine McCormick or whatever that. Yeah, I don't know why I got them confused.
Yeah, it's Catherine McCormick.
But yeah, Braveheart, she was in. She plays Electra King. Sharon Stone and Vera Farmiga, which I didn't even know really what Vera Farmiga was doing around this time, but they were both considered for the role.
Vera Farmiga, I don't think Vera Farmiga was doing much around this time, but I mean, you never know. She might have been a big stage person or something like that. There apparently was like 1 million women considered for both of these roles, but
yeah, no, there were plenty of names being thrown around. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, Sharon Stone would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with Sharon Stone. I just, I can't really see it now that I've watched Sophie Marceau do it. But the reason Marceau was, it was actually a performance in a film called Firelight. She was not in the Charlie Chaplin film. Fireflight was a film that caught Broccoli's attention.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen, but yeah. Robert Carlyle, he was, I guess, hot off Full Monty still at this point, because that was a couple years before.
Yep. And Trainspotting.
Yeah, of course. So he was becoming a name. He plays a villain named Renard. Javier Bardem actually turned this role down, which is interesting because yeah, he comes back. I mean, he not comes back, but he is in a later Bond film. Maybe it's good he did, because he's obviously very memorable in the role he eventually takes. Jean Reno was the only other one that I saw, but I don't know how far that got into. But I think Jean Reno at that time was just kind of, we need a foreign villain. Jean Reno makes sense. So yeah. Michael Apted really liked Carlisle, though. He said he called him a real firecracker. Said he did a great job of getting you to feel sympathetic for him at times, even though he was like a evil bastard. Very, very, I didn't see much about them mentioning this, but very Blofeld. Like, he felt like, because they couldn't do Blofeld at the time, like, he kind of felt like an alternate version of him. He's got this, which we'll talk about this later, but he's got this really weird condition where I don't really completely understand it, but I guess there's a bullet in his head that is gradually going like down towards his spine, I guess. But basically, like, he can't feel pain, and there's a really weird, and we'll get it. I guess we can get into it, but like there's a really weird scene in the movie where they're describing this, and he goes, "How did he survive that?" And then the doctor comes in and says, "Well, he killed the doctor who told him that he couldn't get the bullet out." And I was like, that doesn't answer that question at all. But anyway, no, that actually came from. I don't know. I can't find exactly where it's at, but that was the Otto character from Tomorrow Never Dies, the the blonde henchman in Tomorrow Never Dies. He was supposed to have that condition. That was an early draft of something with him, and then they got rid of it, and then they brought it back for this because the writers were looking at past stuff. Well, I guess I'll talk about that when I get to the writers. But so that's Robert Carlyle. So he's kind of our villain. Well, I mean, until we find out that somebody else, which I guess we can go ahead and say that. I mean, Sophie Marceau ends up being the main villain, I guess, or at least a collaborator.
Yeah, she's the main villain.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Denise Richards, who we've already mentioned a little bit, she was coming off a trio of decent, like, at least films. Maybe they weren't huge hits, but they were recognized. Wild Things, of course. I think Wild Things was a hit. But Starship Troopers, and then which is a movie, Starship Troopers and Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Are two movies that at the time, Drop Dead Gorgeous might have done okay at the time, but that is like a big, like, I don't know if it's a cult film or what, but that film's got a huge following now. They even did a midnight screening of that at our local art house theater here pretty recently, the Belcourt. And
that's something I still need to see.
I saw it when I saw it in, like, 98 or something, or 99, and I remember thinking it was fine, but I wasn't like, but now people talk about it like it's just one of the best comedies ever. So I definitely need to watch it again. Starship Troopers is a movie that was misunderstood, I would argue. At least the way it was presented. Like, I think a lot of people didn't really understand what Verhoeven was doing. I don't really know why, because we'd all watched RoboCop, but but it's definitely a film that's gotten a lot more acclaim as we've gotten farther away from it. But anyways, Denise Richards, she plays Dr. Christmas Jones. The character was originally written as a French-Polynesian insurance investigator, and they decided to change the nationality once they cast Marceau. And but they decide, and then
when they cast Richards, right?
Well, no, after they casted Marceau, they decided to not have that character be French anymore. So then it turned into an American.
Oh, I see. They didn't want to have two French characters in the.
I didn't see. I don't know why they changed it from an insurance investigator to a nuclear physicist, other than I think they just wanted to create a female, like, counterpart that was just as smart, if not smarter, than Bond, which they kind of do with the Marceau character too. They were trying things.
Yeah.
But Tiffany Thiessen from obviously Saved by the Bell, Beverly Hills 90210, and all that kind of stuff. She was up for that role. Jerry Halliwell, the former Spice Girl. Ginger Spice, I think. Yeah,
I think so.
I almost said Sexy
right.
Spice. I don't think that's it, though. I think it's Ginger Spice.
No, it's Ginger Spice. Yeah,
she's sexy. Whatever. So those were the only two I really wrote down that were, like, they were kind of there towards the end. But yeah, Denise Richards did say there were, like, hundreds of actresses at that time, mostly unknown, but people that were trying to get jobs at that time.
Yeah, and when I run across these things in the IMDb and everything, and they say, well, this people were considered, it was probably like somebody's short list, and not everybody, like, actually tried out for it or anything like that, but that's what they had.
Well, and it's funny,
or whatever,
too, because Apted said that, like, in an interview, that, like, they would want to cast everybody with someone bigger than they could get, but they would have him, like, they would, like, go to Tom Cruise and be like, hey, we'd like you to play Renard. Or maybe this was a casting director talking about this. And then they go, well, make us an offer, Tom Cruise's agent. And then he'd go back to the broadcast. They go, $1 million. They're like, we're not going to fucking get Tom Cruise for $1 million. Like, so it's like, why are you making me make these, like, calls? Like, it's just so stupid. So I think that's what a lot of these names come down to. Like, Sharon Stone's another one. Like, they wouldn't have probably been able to pay her or whatever, she would have wanted. So it's like, why were they even trying to get these people?
Right.
But I mean, I would have loved to have seen Tom Cruise. Nothing against Robert Carlyle, but that would have been fun. But yeah, it was just kind of crazy. Yeah. Robbie Coltrane is back. We talked about him. He played Valentin Sukovsky in Goldeneye, and he's back for another round in this one. And that's always fun. The late great Robbie Coltrane. Just a few more. Maria Grazia. I'm gonna go with Cucinato. That makes sense. That's what I was
I think
going
it's
for.
Cucinato.
I guess at the time she had been in Il Postino.
Yeah.
That was
Il
that
Postino was the one that I recognized her from.
Yeah. That was a foreign film that actually got nominated for Best Picture in '95. Lost to Braveheart, which Sophia Marceau was in.
Yep.
But yeah, I haven't seen that movie since probably '95. But I did. She looked very familiar, so I'm sure that's what I recognized her from.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's in the movie. She's called Cigar Girl. She's in the opening sequence, the pre-credit sequence, and she's like, well, I'm actually kind of confused about this because I get the impression that Bond was not supposed to die, since that kind of falls into what their plan was with the money in that opening sequence. But she's like an assassin or whatever. So
I mean, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
I don't really understand much about this opening sequence at all, but we'll go on.
Yeah, it's like it. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. The character did get the name of Giulietta da Vinci in the novelization that was eventually written.
Okay.
Michael Kitchen's back. He was not in Tomorrow Never Dies, but he was in GoldenEye playing Tanner, which is kind of funny because I forgot about that. And last week when we were talking about Colin Samuel, who is back in this one too, as Charles Robinson.
Yep.
I was saying he was kind of the Brosnan's Tanner, but then I was like, oh yeah, no, Tanner's totally in these movies. I just forgot he was in GoldenEye.
Yeah.
It's a different actor, and I think Tanner gets more of a role, especially in the later Craig films. He becomes more of a staple. Like him and Craig have some scenes together and stuff like that. But yeah, Michael Kitchen's back. One of my favorite actor names ever. Judi Dench is back for the third time as M. We got Samantha Bond back as Moneypenny. This will be her second to last Moneypenny appearance. Colin Samuel is back, as we just said. Charles Robinson. This will be his second to last. Sadly, the last performance of Desmond Llewellyn. Now, I remembered this differently. I thought, now he was older, like he was in his 80s, but like I was thinking he was sick, but he died in a car accident that actually happened right after the movie premiered. So I don't know if this was definitely going to be his last film. I mean, they definitely give him like a closing line, kind of, where, you know, he's going down and all that. And they introduced John Cleese as who Bond refers to him as R. John Cleese from Monty Python, A Fish Called Wanda, if anybody doesn't know who that is. But so I never could find that this was definitely going to be Llewellyn's last performance, but he definitely thought he was getting too old to do it.
Well, and there was some other thing that I ran across that said that he wanted to be in the next one. I'm sure they would have found a reason to put him in there, but that probably would have been it. My guess is, if he had made it to Die Another Day, I think he would have officially handed the keys over to John Cleese. Of course, anybody who's getting the keys handed to them in this chapter is not going to continue going on doing whatever. But if they do believe the Pierce Brosnan stuff is going to continue after this, I assume that there would have been a scene in there where Cleese was like, "All right."
I love John Cleese. Like, John Cleese is amazing. He's fucking funny as hell. I don't really care for him in these couple of movies, though. It's not that against him. It's just Llewellyn's like the one person we've had forever, and it's just, I don't know. It's weird, and then. It just feels really forced, like the way they're playing, or like the Brosnan and Cleese and stuff. I don't know. But anyways, it's not like a deal breaker. Like I don't hate it, but it's just, it sucks. It's the last Llewellyn. But he does get to go out on kind of a fun, like, you know, final scene. And I do like the fact in that scene that like him and Bond are both giving John Cleese's character shit. So it's kind of funny to see Q on the other side of that. We also get a classic. Q's really pissed at Bond because he tears up something. That gets to happen. Maybe one of the best in that nature. But anyways, yeah. So that's pretty much the cast. So production. About a month before Tomorrow Never Dies was released, Barbara Broccoli was watching, and this wasn't the initial idea that they were initially going with. But Barbara Broccoli saw a documentary. Well, it's actually an episode of Nightline talking about how major oil companies were trying to vie for control of the oil reserves in the Caspian Sea during the dissolution or whatever of the Soviet Union, the breaking down of the Soviet Union. So she thought that was interesting, and she thought that someone trying to control a pipeline would be a really interesting motive for a Bond villain. So that was just kind of where that went. Another influence for the film definitely was Patty Hearst. I didn't like go back in and dive into the Patty Hearst kidnapping, but that was a, like a major, it was her dad was, he was Hearst, right? He was the William Randolph Hearst, Citizen Kane, and she was kidnapped. And it's a pretty fascinating story. If that interests you at all, definitely, if you hadn't heard about that, I would definitely recommend listeners looking into that. There's also been a couple movies made about it and stuff like that. I think that's right. Yeah. She won the daughter.
I mean, I think she's the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, not the daughter, but yeah. But she was related, yeah.
Yeah, and it was yeah. But that was one of the more like that was like one of the bigger like maybe the first like as far as like everybody knew about it, like kidnapping with a ransom and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a whole thing in there too about the revolutionary like the people that had kidnapped her, like they kind of had their own agenda and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. So that was obviously with the Sophie Marceau character. She plays the daughter of a tycoon. She at one point had been kidnapped in her life, and which factors into why, I guess why she becomes a villain. There were also other ideas floating around, though. There was a prequel film. There were a couple of spinoffs they were thinking about doing. The Vincent Schiavelli character, which we really liked from Tomorrow Never Dies. They were thinking about doing a movie with him. He died, though, around this time, I think. So, and I don't know how far it got, even if he hadn't, but they were also seriously considering a Michelle Yeoh spinoff, which never came to be. Neil Purvis and Robert Wade come in to write the screenplay. The interesting thing about them is they kind of become like the new Richard Maibaum. They're going to be around at least having something to do with the screenplays all the way through No Time to Die. So we're gonna be talking about Neil Purvis and Robert Wade. At this time, they had written a film called Plunkett and McLean. I've never seen it. I'd heard of it, but I don't think I've ever actually watched it. But Broccoli really liked it, or somebody really liked it, and so that's where they got their notice. They would actually also write the first Johnny English film, which is a Bond parody, I guess. Send Up. They also wrote a screenplay based on the Halle Berry character in Die Another Day called Jinx, which we'll talk about that some next week, which that was another proposed spinoff that never happened. Purvis and Way used ideas from other scripts. There was the third installment of the Dalton franchise that they were hoping to make in the early 90s. The Dalton's not franchise, the James Bond franchise, but Dalton's run as the character. And then they also they were the ones that suggested making the villain a female. And Broccoli really, really liked that idea. And then, like I said, this is where I had it. They took the can't feel pain characteristic from an early Tomorrow Never Dies draft where the Otto Gotts character was supposed to have that ability. As far as directors go, Joe Dante was a name that was thrown around. I don't even know what that would be. I'd really like to see it. Peter Jackson was another one.
Yeah, although from what I could understand, so they liked what Peter Jackson did with Heavenly Creatures, but then saw The Frighteners and thought, okay, this is not our guy.
It's crazy. I don't know why I thought that was funny.
And I'm also sitting there going, I guess you guys didn't see Bad Taste Meet the Feebles either.
That would be amazing if like Barbara Broccoli was like, I sat down and watched this movie called Meet the Feebles, and I was like, this guy can make a Bond film. But I get it, because Heavenly Creatures was very female centric, and they were very focused on finding someone that could get really good performances from an actress, because this is, I don't know, it's like the late 90s. It's sad that it's so rare that like something like this would happen, but it is what it is. And they were trying to find somebody, which is a lot of the reason Michael Apted gets hired. But they also, real quick, before I get to him, the other one that was like pretty might have been like right there at the end was Alfonso Cuarón. He eventually decided to go do Speed Racer. He had been offered Speed Racer, which he doesn't direct. He ends up not directing Speed Racer, but that was why he left this. That's why he decided not to do this.
He would have been coming off of the Great Expectations movie, I guess, that and a Little Princess,
which
and
once
things
again,
like that.
Female, centric Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why they did. Like, the idea of a female director never came up, but a male director
right.
who had directed women well.
Yeah, exactly. Like Catherine Bigelow or somebody
Catherine
like
Bigelow
that.
would have been awesome, by the way, probably.
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, so then I guess, because his next big thing, because this is pre-Harry Potter and stuff like that. So, yeah, he definitely would have just been coming off those couple. So anyway, so then they do eventually hire Michael Apted. Michael Apted, he had directed Sissy Spacek and Coal Miner's Daughter, Sigourney Weaver, Gorillas in the Mist, and Jodie Foster in Tay in the Wind, also known as Nell.
Yep. Well, and you know, you see Michael Apted's name now. I believe he died recently, right? He died like a couple years ago, maybe.
Double check that. Keep going with what you're saying.
His legacy is the 7 Up, 14 Up documentaries, all the Up documentaries, basically. So, like, when I saw that name, that's immediately what came to mind. Although, yes, I knew he had done a whole bunch of other things, like Coal Miner's Daughter and things like that. He's done a ton of stuff, but it seemed like a weird direction.
No, I agree. I remember this at the time being like, Michael Apted, like, what? But he died in 2021, the beginning of 2021. He was only 79.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago. Yeah.
There towards the end, he was doing a lot of TV and stuff. But like you said, he did the 7-Ups. He did he directed that movie with Jennifer Lopez called Enough, where it's like a domestic thriller. But he followed this up with a movie with Kate Winslet called Enigma, which is a pretty cool, like, it's like a thriller. It's like a spy thriller, I think, if I remember correctly. But yeah, no, he was a really well-known director. And the thing was not only that, but like all 3 of those performances got nominated for Best Actress, which, I mean, I'm sure it's just one of those things. I think it's funny. Like, I'm sure Apted didn't hurt that situation, but I mean, Jodie Foster, Sigourney Weaver, and fucking Sissy Spacek, I don't know, like, they can act really well, so I don't know. Anyways, it's fine. Apted was also a lot of the reason Denise Richards wanted to be a part of the film, because she knew he was a really good director, and she wanted to work with him. She worked with some really interesting directors early on in her career. Dana Stevens, who was Apted's wife at the time, she also did a small, like a rewrite, or she polished, mostly focusing on the female characters. And then Bruce Fierstein was brought back in. He's been involved with the last couple in some form or fashion. He was brought in to polish up some more, and he was kind of focused on the Bond stuff. What I thought was interesting, though, was the opening sequence. When he read the script, he was really confused as to, like...
Pretty sure it's Fierstein.
Fierstein, sorry, yeah. I don't know why I keep saying Fierstein. Fierstein, he didn't really understand, like, the motivation behind what all was going on in the opening scene. Like, he couldn't really... Like, for some reason, he couldn't really grasp his head around, like, why Bond was just chasing this woman so just trying to get her when he had already gotten the money and everything and all the information. And then there's that bit at the hot air balloon where he says something like, it's not too late. That was something that Fierstein added, like he was actually trying to save her, was the idea. But then he said when he went back and watched the dailies with Michael Apted, which at that point, the opening scene was like 27 minutes. It got knocked down a little bit, but it was still the longest. It's the longest pre-title sequence until No Time to Die. But he said there was that scene with the torpedoes, and where Bond shoots the torpedoes trying to kill her, and Fierstein's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. If he's actually trying to save her, why would he shoot torpedoes? And Apted just kind of shrugged his shoulders. He's like, they're non-life threatening torpedoes. So there was it seems like there was a lot of like putting stuff together at the last minute, and I don't know, it was just interesting. So what I understand is that Dana Stevens wrote it to the point that Bond nearly became a secondary character when she wrote it, and then they put Fierstein in there to go,
let's get it back and get it back more Bond centric, and we'll keep all the other stuff that we like about the female centric stuff. So that was an interesting thing too, that Dana Stevens took this opportunity to try to make it more about, Electra King.
Yeah.
Than
it was like there were like sequences where like Bond I think just kind of disappeared from the movie, like because it got more focused on her, and it was kind of telling her story, which I can see that because there's a lot of world building that probably needs to be done, and they kind of chose not to do it, and that's fine. But like I got the impression that's kind of what Stevens was doing, was she was doing scenes where it was focusing more on King and explaining why she really wants to do this with Renard. Because honestly, we don't really know at the end of the day. Bond brings up something about, Stockholm Syndrome, but then that's never mentioned again. And so I think that's kind of what the Stevens stuff that got cut.
Yeah, and apparently that was an ending too that they wanted to do at one point, was to have Electra survive and then be in a hospital and being treated for Stockholm Syndrome or something like that. But apparently that was rejected. I'm glad it was, but it was something that was pitched apparently.
I did not read that. That's interesting. The film was originally actually supposed to come out in 2000. At one point, there was a rumor that it was actually titled like Bond 2000. I don't know that that's actually true. But they had a bunch of other titles, though. Death Waits for No Man was one, Fire and Ice, Pressure Point, and Dangerously Yours, which World Is Not Enough is probably the better one out of those.
Yeah.
This would be speaking of Marceau's Electra character, this would be a film notable that it's one of the few where Bond actually kills a lead female character. The only other one really where that even happened, well, at least pre-Craig, unless I'm missing something from the Craig, but at this time, Never Say Never was really the only time that, and that wasn't even an official Bond film. So,
right. I also heard that in The World Is Not Enough was supposed to be a little bit more related to that family crest that we've been talking about, and that that the story was going to center around one of Bond's children, I guess illegitimate children who have grown up and want to get revenge on him, which I wouldn't be opposed to seeing something like that.
Maybe that's something they can do later. There was a bunch of stuff like that, yeah. And a lot of it came down to that, MGM was just so insistent that this movie come out like 2 years later that they just kind of, at some point, they just kind of had to start going, okay, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
I don't think it was like as crazy as Tomorrow Never Dies, where they didn't even have a completed script, but
right.
There was definitely some shuffling there at the end. There was also an early draft where he just shoots her in cold blood. Like he just walks in and kills her. Like she doesn't even really get a chance to defend herself or say anything. And they decide, and like she hasn't even contacted Renard, which actually makes a lot more sense because she is on there with Renard when she gets shot, and then he's shocked later to find out something happened to her. And I'm like, didn't you hear that? Like.
I mean, you could have heard something, and then the radio just goes out and. It you don't know for a fact that anything's happened.
Yeah. She might not have been pressing the button. I don't know. But it was kind of weird. Filming locations, they were in Spain and France, Azerbaijan. I don't know if I just pronounced that right.
Sounds good to me.
Says. Turkey, and the UK. Obviously, they used pine wood for interior type stuff for some of it. The pre-title sequence, it was shot in Bilbao, Spain, and also in London. They split it up. 14 minutes. Like I said, it's the longest pre-title sequence until No Time to Die. I'm surprised it's only 14 minutes. I actually thought it
does feel a lot longer, yes.
I don't mean like, I'm not even saying that in a negative way. I just thought it was longer than that because it's like, it's a couple of different sequences, right? You have like a finale to one sequence and then...
Yeah.
And then you kind of start up another one. It's almost like there's like two independent things that happen. That's just not usually what happens.
Yeah, I mean all that stuff that happens at MI6 could easily have happened after the credits.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of the plot points in this too is that the MI6, like the money that they bring in for Electra King's dad, it explodes. So obviously, it does a lot of damage to the MI6 building. So they move to like a temporary place, and where they filmed that was It's the Eileen Donan Castle, which is a pretty famous castle out there. And but the thing it's most known for, it's the castle they use in Highlander.
Yeah.
There can only be one, which is the Sean Connery reference.
There can be only one. Yeah.
Connery too was also on the set of this for like a day. Like he was just hanging out. And apparently he saw Brosnan do some stuff, and then after that he's like, "Man, I hope they're paying you enough."
It was apparently him outrunning the fireball on those cables or whatever.
Yeah. During the filming of the boat chase, I don't have a lot of like stunt stuff, but like during the filming of the boat chase, there were webcams set up that were overlooking the Thames. And so you could actually watch this online, which I'm thinking about like in 99, like that was when we like majority of us were still dial up, and it took me like an hour to like download a trailer so I could watch it. I'm trying to think who was able to like get on and
probably
watch
not very
live
many,
stream.
but I imagine it also probably felt awesome to watch a blocky, slow video. It was like, it's awesome. It's so cool. It's so fast these days. Yeah, I mean
that almost feels like at least like through the media or like through a big movie, that I don't know how many like other streaming events there were at that, in 98 or 99 or whatever. That just seems really crazy when you think about the year.
I remember being the year where the internet really took off. Obviously, you had the .coms that were coming in, but like, but I remember that was Blair Witch Project. I remember a big announcement around the Eyes Wide Shut trailer with Tom Cruise and everything. That 99 was a big year for all of that. So.
Oh, it definitely was. Yeah, the Blair Witch thing there's a lot of stuff online for it, right? It had its own website.
They made it seem like
it
was a real case and everything, and even like I remember thinking, oh, is this for real? How did they do that or whatever? And then finally you just start thinking about it, and you're like, no, they wouldn't just put these people's deaths on for like everybody's entertainment and everything.
Exactly.
And, so whatever.
So MGM had also signed a deal with MTV around this time. They were just trying to reach younger people that they didn't think really cared about the Bond films anymore, thought they were just kind of a relic. So they made over 100 hours of Bond-related stuff, and a lot of it was hosted by Denise Richards. Which I never saw anything where it said like, this is why we hired Denise Richards, but it starts feeling that way when you see stuff like that.
Well, the I think the prevailing sentiment about hiring her for the Christmas Jones things is they were worried that they weren't getting younger audiences in after they had GoldenEye with a great kickoff. It didn't seem like they were retaining or getting new viewers, and so they put her in. Now, I remember Denise Richards being a tremendous sex symbol and everything, but I don't remember her being like someone who got you to the theater. Like, that.
No, I don't either.
And I was reading some trivia saying like, they attributed the like $10 million extra opening weekend to Denise Richards being in the movie, and I was like, it could be just a great coincidence of things that happened in 1999, which was a great movie year. And I don't know how you can attribute it all to Denise Richards. I mean, I can understand why you would think that, but I mean, I don't know. I was reading a lot of trivia on this going, I don't really think you can really put it on her, but whatever.
I think they just I don't understand that. This kind of reminds me of also like, it's different territory, but like Jeff Goldblum was kind of there in like the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
People were saying, can he carry a film? Because he was in Jurassic Park and Independence Day. Like, yeah. And not that people don't like him in both of those movies. I mean, he's great. He's still scenes, but I still don't know that people were like, I'm only going to see that because of Jeff Goldblum.
Right. It like adds an extra $10 to $20 million to your figure. Like, it's all these strictly Jeff Goldblum fans that came out to watch the movie. Yeah.
But yeah, no, she wasn't, because I mean, even her movies, I mean, because Starship Troopers did not make money. I don't know Drop Dead Gorgeous. Wild Things made money, but it wasn't like a huge hit or anything.
I don't remember any of these movies really doing a lot. Wild Things, I think, had I mean, we could look this up. I don't think Wild Things was a big thing.
No, it definitely wasn't huge.
Starship Troopers, nobody knew who that cast was really when that came out. So, yeah, it's interesting that I don't know. I think Drop Dead Gorgeous may have just made just a handful of millions of dollars. It wasn't it wasn't much at all, but yeah. So yeah, anyway.
I mean, this was easily, I think, her highest grossing film at this point. I don't know.
And probably of all time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and then while this isn't based on a novel, but like the last couple, there was a novelization written. It was written by Raymond Benson. There's a couple sequences in the film that are very similar to sequences that took place in other Bond novels, the ones that weren't written by Fleming. They've never given them credit. They've never come out and said this is what they were doing. But the M getting kidnapped, which actually kind of comes back up in one of the Craig films. There was a Bond novel written by Kingsley Amis called Colonel's Son, and that's a big plot point in that, is that M gets kidnapped. One of the film's settings, too, is Baku. That's also one of the settings in a Bond novel called The Man from Barbarossa, which was written by John Gardner. This was interesting. Speaking of 9/11, a scene that doesn't make it into the movie, they filmed it. It's M giving like this like rah-rah speech after the explosion. And at the end of it, she says something like, "This will not stand." Judi Dench really didn't like that speech. She thought she called it Churchillian. But Apted talked her into doing it. But then they ended up cutting it from the film. But what's interesting, and obviously just coincidental, but it was just still odd, was that 2 years later, 9/11 happens, and Tony Blair gives this like big speech. Which he ends with, "This will not stand."
Well, yeah, and it's also a classic thing from the first George Bush, when he's talking about the aggression against Kuwait and as a prelude to going into Iraq in 1991. This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait, which of course later on in the Big Lebowski they replay, but anyway.
Yeah, they do. I'm just imagining though, like Judi Dench watching Tony Blair give this speech, rolling her eyes.
Oh my God, that would have been amazing. That would have been amazing.
The film ends also with there's a joke made about the Millennium Bug, which
that's right.
Which I wonder how many younger people today even know what that's referring to. But if anyone's listening to this doesn't, you should definitely look it up. But essentially, there were people that were really nervous that when the clocks clicked over to 2000, everything was just going to shut down.
Well, yeah, because they were using 2 digits, I guess, so it was going to go to 00, and they thought that the computers would revert to some or get confused or something like that. And Y2K was a big worry back in 1999, and I don't know. I guess there was probably a variety of things being done during that time. Even the movie Office Space talks about how they're like, his job is basically making sure that glitch doesn't happen. So there's probably tons of IT people back in the day just making sure that didn't occur. So
exactly. And then the only other thing I had was there was there once again they made another first person shooter video game. We're in the era where they're making video games out of all these, and it was for Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, but I don't think anybody really liked it that much. Do you have anything else on the production that you heard that you wanted to mention, or?
No, I don't think so. There's there was a making of on this particular disc. It wasn't the same, obviously, as the ones that came pre Brosnan. It looked like a TV special that they just kind of included on the disc. And it's not very good. The host at one point has Pierce Brosnan on this submarine set, or a submarine. I can't remember if it's a set or if it's an actual submarine. And it's like, "We got Pierce Brosnan here." And one of the first questions she goes into is like, "I went and I watched all the James Bonds before this movie, and there's an actual whole section of James James Bond movies in my video store. Isn't that amazing? And Pierce Brosnan was just like, didn't know how to answer, and just kind of was like, well, anyway, what you have to do when you do this is you have to know who the man is. You have to read into, like he's just talking about the craft of acting after that. It's like, because there's nothing to say to that question at all.
Like, video stores have been around since the early 80s. And
it's not entirely surprising that they would divide the James Bonds into one little section and so on. I guess she was hoping that Brosnan would have something very clever to say about that, but he was just like, I'm going to talk about acting. Here's the art of acting. Here's what I do when I try to get into a character, and so on and so forth. Yeah, no, there's not much in the way of the production that I saw in this that really like, oh yeah, I need to mention that. So,
gotcha. I know. I thought at first you were going to say she asked about like Remington Steele or something. She was like, I just want to talk about Remington Steele.
That'd be amazing. I halfway expected that in that interview. It was so bad. So,
so music wise, we got David Arnold back doing the score. Once again, though, much like Tomorrow Never Dies, it's hard for me to even remember what the score sounded like.
Yeah, same.
But it's not like Goldeneye, where it's like, oh my God, what is this? It's not too invasive. But the title song, "The World Is Not Enough," was written by Arnold and Don Black, and it was performed by Garbage.
Yeah,
Shirley Manson led Garbage, which they were that was probably like their heyday, right? That was when they were probably at their
definitely their heyday. In the mid to late 90s, Garbage came out with most of the stuff that from. They already felt like they were making Bond themes. They were very
I thought that too.
Atmospheric and moody already. So they were a natural fit, I felt like, to do a Bond theme. So
yeah, and her voice, and I was thinking about that too, because the Only When It Rains or whatever, I'm like, you could totally make that into a Bond song. It's even kind of got a Bond title, already. I think I'm paranoid. I mean, they were fun.
That would make the second band that I've seen live that has done a Bond. I also saw Duran Duran.
Oh, I was trying to think. Yo, that's right. You mentioned that. Yeah. I don't know that I've seen any. I'm trying to think. Well, I saw Soundgarden, so I've seen Chris Cornell at least. Soundgarden concert where I got hit in the back of the head with like an orange. Somebody, it was at Municipal, and some asshole just from like the upper deck just threw an orange. I mean, not directly at me. They just threw an orange, and it just happened. Of all the people on the floor, it hit me.
That's weird. I haven't seen Soundgarden, but I did see Chris Cornell when he became a solo act there for a brief moment. So that will be an upcoming one. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Chris Cornell, man. I miss that guy. That guy was great. So I will say about this theme song, not giving our opinion, but this was one where they actually talked about like some rankings. IGN called this the 9th best James Bond theme in the 2000s. And then in 2012, Grantland cited it as the second best Bond theme song. Yeah. Only behind Goldfinger was the only one they put ahead of it.
Yeah, it's hard to beat Goldfinger.
Yeah, the English band Straw, who I'd never heard of, but they also recorded a theme song, but it was rejected. And best I could tell you, it's not something you can like find on a different album or anything. Reception, just like the last couple of Brosnan films, it was pretty mixed. Positives mostly centered around Brosnan and Marceau, their performances and their chemistry, and the film's decision to focus more on characters than it had in previous entries. Which I'll agree with that. At times, this does almost feel like more of a character piece than anything else.
Yeah.
Most of the negatives centered around Denise Richards,
which is unfortunate. We can get it. I know we get more into our opinions later in the other sections, but look. Do I think that she is awesome in this movie? No, by no means. But if you want to talk about the average Bond girl that's in, like, how many of these actors are ever great in their role? She does exactly the average amount that anybody else does in these movies. So
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure she didn't love the reception, but she, like, interviews I'd read with her, though, she was really professional about it, and she seemed to take it all in stride. And she talked about how people, because when you first see her, she almost looks like Lara Croft or something. Like, she's got
which is they did that on purpose.
Absolutely,
I believe.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so she's got like a tank top on. She's wearing like these short shorts. You know, she looks like Lara Croft. And like Denise Richards dressed up as Lara Croft on Halloween. That's what it looks like. But she said, but she was saying, you know, but if you put me like in whatever you consider nuclear physicist clothes, you just would have complained about the fact that I was like, you know, wearing that. I mean, she's like, there's no way around it. She's like, I was really happy to be in it. She's like, I felt like it was one of the better written as far as like, at least it was a Bond girl that was like at least on par with Bond at least in the smarts, you know, in the brain department. And yeah, she was very professional about it all. We were very mean to her for sure.
Yeah. As far as characters, female characters in the Bond universe, she's way up there because there's just so many of them are just damsels in distress for the most part.
Like Tanya Roberts. Like, is Tanya Roberts that much better? And nothing against Tanya Roberts, but it's like, is she that much better than Denise Richards? I don't hear people griping about her.
Yeah, you can never really just like blame. You know, these writers don't know how to write. I mean, even though they brought in Dana Stevens, they don't really know how to write women, and I think that shows a lot when these actors have to come in and do this stuff. So, you know, yeah, is she awesome in this movie? I would say no, and there's some line readings that are like, I don't know about that, but. Yeah, I mean, I think by 1999, audiences are sophisticated enough at this point to think, can't we get better than this? Can't we do better than this? And that's probably where she got most of that that criticism.
For sure. And it clearly, like you said, they were clearly trying, but they've still, it's a bunch of dudes writing, you know, for a woman, and that doesn't always turn out right. I liked her when she gets introduced, though, and she tells Bond her name is Christmas, and she's just like, I've heard all the Christmas jokes, so please don't do that, or something like that. It was just the way I thought that was a pretty fun line.
You know, she says, I've heard them all.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah.
So that he can say, I don't know any doctor jokes.
Yeah. Which is a cool little moment. And she also has to unfortunately deal with and this is another thing with all these Bond girls, they eventually, whether it makes sense or not, they end up sleeping with Bond at the end, and it's like, it just comes out of nowhere, like a lot of the times, and
there was never any moment where you thought, oh, those two were sleeping together.
And I mean, talk about being mean. Variety called her the least plausible nuclear physicist in the history of movies, who makes even the electrochemist Elizabeth Shue played in 1997's The Saint sound like a Nobel laureate. So but it's like, how many fucking nuclear physicists does anybody know? I mean,
exactly.
What is it? Is there are nuclear physicists? They can't look like Denise Richards? I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. Especially in 2023, It doesn't make any sense. I would say with the retrospective stuff I read, unlike a lot of these we've been talking about, it might have even gotten worse, like as far as people's takes on it. I mean, you definitely have people that like this, but there's not like one I could find where it's like, oh, people misunderstood this one, you know, like they did with like maybe Tomorrow Never Dies. But also, I think a lot of that has to do just with the subject matter and everything. It almost felt dated when the movie came out, you know. So I just don't think there's anything we can take from it like we could with Tomorrow Never Dies, where it's like these kind of media giants actually do exist now, you know, that kind of thing. But anyways, that is all I had on the production. So are you ready to talk about just our general feelings?
Yeah.
Let's do it. This is a segment we like to call a review to a kill.
I've got you in my sights.
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
There's no need to shout. I'm not shouting.
Why don't you stop your whining and get on with it? I've heard this shit before.
We are going to give you our thoughts on whatever film we are discussing this week. This week we are discussing 1999's The World Is Not Enough. I will say before Chris talks about his opinion, the general synopsis of this: James Bond uncovers a nuclear plot while protecting an oil heiress from her former kidnapper, an international terrorist who can't feel pain. I think it's really odd they put the "who can't feel pain" at the end of that. that like does nothing for the story. So I don't know. Anyways, what do you think about The World Is Not Enough?
I really did not like this movie. The first thing is this has surprise villain syndrome, where like a lot of the things that happen in the movie don't make sense if
Correct.
you once you reveal who the villain is, because a lot of this stuff is a whole bunch of distractions to make you think one person is the villain, and then when you find out, oh, it's Sophie Marceau, you're like, oh, couldn't you have done this in an easier way, like that didn't require all of this nonsense? And like at the very beginning, he's getting this money and he wants to know a name of somebody who killed an agent, and it kills me that Bond is in this room with all these dudes, and this is the plan they came up with. Oh, I've got these special glasses that are going to cause a distraction. I'm going to be able to shoot a couple of guys, and then and he completely ignores the woman in the room. Like the woman can't possibly hurt him or whatever. and he takes the Swiss banker, and then of course he gets shot. It gets a dart to the neck because the woman, of course, is going to, of course she's behind a lot of this. And then you have that big chase and whatever, and like what kills me too is when this whole plan is, okay, they've soaked the money in urea.
Yes.
And because Bond touches the money and he touches ice, it's like he sees this chemical reaction, and so he runs after King, who's going into the money to go to look at the money in the vault, and then of course Bond isn't there in time. It blows up because of something with some detonator in his pen that they put in. And it blows up. It blows up part of MI6. There's this big, huge explosion. I don't understand why Cigar Girl is out on a boat with a gun. Like, wait, like, is she expecting someone to come out of the hole? Like later? I don't get this. We're kind of sinning this movie here, and I don't mean to sin a movie, but it's one of these things where it was so ludicrous at the beginning of the movie that I couldn't shut that off. I was like, why is she out here? Why does MI6 allow boats to just be around in their harbor with some woman in this red skin tight suit and a gun? Like nobody saw this. And then of course he goes into Q's room, which of course is right adjacent to the vault that for whatever reason. Yeah. And he gets into this boat, and of course Q's like, no, don't take that. That's not finished. It's finished enough to go do a whole bunch of other things and stuff. And they get this big huge boat chase. The boat is great. I'm not a big fan of the boat chase.
No, I know.
And then the subsequent hot air balloon pursuit later on and all that, and yeah, it's a super long intro. I don't really care about the length of it. No, I just care about like how this makes any sense, because if Elektra wanted to kill her dad, it seems like it would be a pretty easy thing to do without all the things they get to happen here. She just so happens to have a connection with M, because her father and M used to talk when she got kidnapped, and they had discussions about what they were going to do with the ransom and everything. And so she gets her in on it, and okay, here's my plan. I'm going to soak the money in urea, and then I'm going to change my dad's pin out with a detonator. And then when he gets to the money, it's going to blow up. It's very Bondian. I'm not saying that this is not a James Bond villain plan, because it's clearly that. But it really doesn't make any sense to me once you find out that she is behind it, because there's so many things she could have done with the access that she has that didn't require doing any of this stuff that she did. And so I was one of those things like, aha, ta-da, she's the surprise villain. I was like, no, this doesn't. Why would you do all of this to do the things that you want to do? And also Also, the plot of this movie has a lot to do with Goldfinger. Like, I mean, it's like Goldfinger in a way, because in Goldfinger, the idea was to blow up the gold in Fort Knox so that he would have the control of all the gold and that he would be the richest man. And this is the same thing. Blowing up the way of the pipelines so that only one pipeline can supply oil from this one place. And it's another thing I feel like probably could have been accomplished without all of this other stuff. I haven't had this experience in a while. There's always the why don't they kill Bond in every Bond movie, but this one feels egregious, like one of the most egregious that I've seen in a long time. They have Bond there and don't kill him so many times. The biggest thing about that surprise villain thing for me is that there's a part where they go off skiing and like all these henchmen show up. And they're like, oh, and I guess I guess it's for the movie to show that, oh, she's really in danger, and so you don't really suspect her or whatever. But I don't know why you would go through all of this trouble to make it look like you're not a villain, and send henchmen out to where you're skiing and everything.
Yeah, no kid, and she didn't even know Bond was going to be with her. Like he just decides he's not going to leave, and he goes with her with the skis. Yeah, no, there's a lot. That's the thing. Once you that happens a lot too. It's one of the things that, you know, it would have made more sense to give it away earlier, I think, because there's also that weird scene where Bond is like, he knows, like he's figured it out, but he can't get her to admit it. And then she kind of tries to, like, in a really bizarre, like, I don't even think it's convincing. She tries to turn it on him and say, like, he was keeping stuff from her and he was using her as bait.
Right.
Which is what M did basically when she was kidnapped. And then the M thing too, like, I don't even understand, like, what did kidnapping M have to do with anything? Like, other than she's just pissed that, you know, she just doesn't like her, but I don't know why. I mean, M could have very easily just not traveled to where they were, and that would have been totally acceptable. She could have just sent more 00 agents in.
Right.
Which is what she should have done. I mean, none of it makes any sense.
Yeah, I guess because she feels personally involved or whatever, but, like, still, like, yeah, you wouldn't do that as the head of MI6. No. You wouldn't go to a place like that. The other thing that bothers me too, and I understand they're trying to do all these twists on old characters and everything. The Robert Carlyle thing, the fact that he can't feel pain and he's got this bullet in his brain and all this other stuff, that is never used to any effect in this movie. I feel like if you're going to have a villain that can't feel pain, you should put them in situations where that becomes a huge advantage to him. Like, you know, like if he feels he's going to die, I would love to have a crack at this screenplay. Actually, man, I would write this Robert Carlyle character completely different. Like, if he feels he's going to die, then you can put him in a whole bunch of situations where he can run through fire and all sorts of other stuff if he wants. He doesn't care if he looks burned or if the way he looks or anything, because he's not going to feel it. He just has to make sure he doesn't die before the plot is done. And so, like, so they never use it to any effect. And I know that they're trying to make him seem like yet another big Bond villain guy that we've seen before, you know, that with the kind of traits we've seen before, and then they divert us away and like, oh yeah, it's not him. It feels like to me, if you're going to build up that kind of character, then you should use that. So that was disappointing to me, that they would do that, and if you're going to have a villain like this, you should definitely implement that more.
There was and I read, I can't remember if it was one of the writers or like one of the producers, there was some stuff brought up, they were talking about, like, stuff that didn't make it to script, but they were talking about different things to do, and I think it was Firestein that was talking about one idea was that when Bond and him fought, Bond would just start breaking his bones, like, So, like, he couldn't feel it, but, like, he would have, like, no use of his right arm or whatever. And I was like, that could be really, I mean.
That would have been badass.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess they just didn't know how to actually film that to where it would, still be like a PG-13 movie or whatever. I don't know if that was a problem. I don't know what it was. But
I don't think it would have been a problem.
Yeah, but whatever, because that final battle is one of the reasons I don't like this movie, because I don't even really know what's going on at that point. Like, I can't even figure out, like, they're at the bottom of the ocean in this submarine.
Yeah,
I can't even figure out what Carlisle's going to be able to do at this point. And they just keep going over and over, just showing him trying to like shove that warhead in or whatever. And it's just it's like, oh my god, like, can we quit cutting to this? And then he'll get distracted, and then he'll go back to trying to push it in.
I, at the risk of being really dense, and I'm sure I've appeared dense in all of these podcasts, but there's one thing that I didn't understand either, is that Bond and Christmas talk about the plan in the submarine. They say, we're going to need to surface the submarine so that it'll appear on radar. And so right after they say that, there's this scene where Bond goes in, and it's Carlisle and a whole bunch of other like people, henchmen, who are like shooting at him. He shoots out this console on the submarine so that they can't control it anymore, basically, and it starts to sink or whatever.
Yeah.
He comes back, and she goes, "So we're going up then?" And I was like, wasn't that the plan? I don't know what she meant by that. And it's supposed to be
dumbest thing.
You know what I'm talking about,
it was
right?
Terrible.
She's like, "We're going up then." I was like, yeah, that was the original plan. Like, maybe she's saying that because they can't go up now because he destroyed that console. And it was never really clear. It looks like it's supposed to be a comedic moment in the movie, and I just didn't get it. I didn't understand what was being said.
I think it's also very possible that something was cut that would explain it more, like why that happened. That's usually what I assume, but no, it's just dumb. And I think that's part of the reason why people were coming down hard on Denise Richards, because most people don't realize if the character's not written well, that actor's probably not going to be able to do much with it. And and it was like she got dumber as the movie went on. It was like she started off like real whip smart, real, she was par to par with Bond. And then once he had to admit that he was a secret agent, all of a sudden he just became, so much smarter than her and all that kind of stuff.
The other one too, like, not that this scene is exactly like, but when they go through that pipeline, using that vehicle of some sort or whatever, it is reminiscent of, is it Diamonds Are Forever, where they bury Bond into that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah.
And so he has to crawl through that thing or like use that little machine to go through. It's reminiscent of that a little bit, but like that's another one of those scenes where like they see on the radar that the nuclear warhead caught up with them and it blew up, and they just assume Bond is dead. Nobody ever once thinks, well, where it blew up was exactly where the pipe diverts, and they would have been able to get out in time if they needed to. And so it's another one of those annoying things about when they think Bond is dead and they don't verify it and whatever. So anyway, I feel like when you watch this movie, Denise Richards should be way down on the list as far as like things you may not like about it.
Oh, and I'll be honest, I did not like Sophie Marceau very much in this. I think it has a lot to do with the writing, but I don't think it's her. But like, I kind of hate her character. Like, and that's a problem with the movie, because that's supposed to be such a focal point of the movie, is that she's the villain and she, and there's this.
Well, we're supposed to feel for her because she was kidnapped.
Yes,
and
of course.
And something changed. Whatever. She says she had to use her body, and like at one point when she had the power over the men, she was able to overtake them and whatever. And so we're supposed to root for her. Yeah, we're supposed to root for her in that moment, but then afterwards. She's a little. I don't know. I kind of like her, and I kind of like her character a little bit more than you probably. But
yeah,
I see what you're saying. The thing is, for me, is I understand what her motivation or like her like
definitely.
what her character is, because she thinks she has power over all men. She got Bond to sleep with her, and like she can get anybody she wants, and that's her sort of her flaw in this movie. Is she thinks that everybody's just going to bow down to her and never kill her and whatever, and that's what ends up killing her, is that Bond is like, all right, I'm done with this. So I kind of like that, but I see what you're saying.
Well, I just think all that's true, and I think the way they set her character up is great. I just think once we know she's the villain, she just gets really generic, like for sure. Like she just becomes a Bond villain, and she's like, I mean, she's not like showing the big eyes or anything, but it's just like all of a sudden she's just like crazy with power and all this stuff. And
if they had kept it to the point where, because there's another interesting aspect to this, is that she believes her father stole her family's fortune here and basically like ruined her homeland for this oil and everything.
Yeah.
That's something that if she kept running with that theme instead of the whole I have power over men and I have Stockholm syndrome and all this other stuff. I think that would have been a way more interesting villain. Is if she's doing this more for her family and she's lashing out at these wealthy businessmen who come in and ruin countries for their wealth, you can really sympathize with a villain like that. It reminds me a little bit of like Killmonger in Black Panther.
Yeah, Black Panther. Yeah.
Where yes, he's the bad guy, but he has a very good reason to be the bad guy, and so like that's something that they just lightly hint at in this movie, is that this is more about her family and living her and doing stuff in her mother's name and that type of thing, and that would have been a little bit more interesting than this whole thing that you're talking about, where she's she's definitely like nearly a bug-eyed villain by the way.
Like ding ding ding.
You're right.
I should stop making fun of Rebecca Gayheart on podcasts. She's probably a lovely person.
Well, no, it's not Rebecca Gayheart. It's the fact that they allowed that particular thing to happen in Urban Legend. So.
Urban Legend is fun to watch mainly because of that, though. So she's doing something right. But anyways, and he kills her. Like, and that's when I don't mind the fact that Bond kills Elektra. I think that could be like a really interesting type the dynamic, and the way they do it is, because she makes that comment like, "You're not going to kill me, you're going to miss me," which is her vanity. And then he shoots her, and he's like, "I never miss." And
right,
that's kind of a fun, turning the table on the phrase, whatever.
Sure.
But then all of a sudden, like now Renard's the main villain again. Like I don't know, it felt like as soon as we find out what's going on with her, she gets killed, and then it's like, well, now we're just back to Renard. And Robert Carlyle is very good, but like I just don't, like you said, they don't do enough with him. They give him this, they point out this whole thing, he can't feel pain. They don't do anything about that.
Well, and that's another thing
weird.
that Bond does in this movie is and to your point about him becoming the main villain by the end of it after they shoot, it seems like to me that I know that he thinks that he's going to be able to get her to not make the submarine go down, but his mission should be the submarine, not to go to her first. And it's the same thing also with the opening sequence when he's got the money and and the woman, the cigar girl or whatever, blow darts the one dude and starts leaving. Well, he's got the money. I guess he's still looking for that lead for who killed the agent or whatever. But like, he goes through a lot of stuff just to go after that one woman, when his main objective has been achieved and whatever. But like, he keeps doing stupid stuff all the way through this that I don't understand. So,
and that's another thing I don't like. I don't like Bond in this very much. Like, I agree with you. I think he and I don't even know why it would be like M at one point says, "Don't make this personal." I'm like, why is this personal to him? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he had just met Elektra, and I don't even know if he had slept with her yet.
No,
Oh no,
it mmade more sense with Terry Hatcher in the previous one that he would not get personal or whatever.
And he didn't seem to give a shit about that. Like he was fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird.
Right.
It just I just feel like there's stuff that's missing. Like I mean, once you read about the production of this, not that it was like, a lot of turmoil and stuff, but they were throwing around a lot of ideas, and then they just kind of threw them together, and it just feels like there's a lot of stuff that either A, got cut out or was just never there and they didn't care. I don't know, but it's just, no, it's not good. I remembered liking this one okay too. I had not seen it since the theater, I don't think, because I didn't remember much about it. But yeah, I'm with you. Like it started off okay, but then the more it kept going, the less interested I was in everything. And like that lasts like 20 minutes. I mean, they might as well have just been like,
it's rough.
It's not interesting. It's not that it's bad. It's just not interesting. Like it's like every Bond ending sequence ever, like just kind of.
They keep on. It seems like they kept coming up with, well, if this happens, do this, and we're like, okay, that's cool, and then that never happens. Whatever the scenario is that they come up with never happens, and I guess you can give props to a movie for not making everything a Chekhov's gun type of thing, where like just because we talk about it, we have to do something later. But they do it a lot in this movie. It feels like to me.
Yeah, no, they do.
Where they're like, well, if this happens, then it never really happens. And the submarine thing could have been cool if she had to hit the button at the right time and all that. And
there's no tension there. Like I'm not worried about them at all. And they're in a fucking submarine that is dead and buried at the bottom of the ocean. And like, I never once am like, oh no, like, is this what's gonna, and then the way they get out of it's so dumb. Like, I guess they swam from I mean, I know they've got something that kind of gives them some momentum, but then at some point they're just swimming, and it's like, how the fuck did you get all the way to the top of the ocean without, but whatever. It's fine.
Yeah.
If I cared about anything that happened before, I probably wouldn't even thought about it. But yeah, I was watching this though, and like in my mind, I was thinking Denise Richards isn't good. Sophia Marceau's awesome, because I remembered liking that twist, and then I saw it. I'm like, well, this wasn't very good. And I think probably because of that, though, then I read that in the reviews, people were just like, loving Sophia Marceau and just hating Denise Richards. So I think part in my mind, it probably is like, well, I don't think either of those things are right. I think like she's good to a point, but then the way they write her character, it's, it's hard for her. I don't know. And then I think Denise Richards obviously isn't that bad. I mean, she actually, the lines of dialogue that they make her say, I'd say she does a pretty good job with them. Like she's
fine.
Yeah, she's totally fine. I'm never going to think she's, and I do like her. I don't know. There is something about her, and that's probably why she has stayed in the zeitgeist as long as she have, even though she doesn't do a bunch of movies and stuff. But people know who Denise Richards is. She's got personality. I mean, there's stuff about her that, she put up with Charlie Sheen for way too long, probably. But that's, things happen.
Definitely.
Because I was trying to even think, like, movie-wise, what she really did after this. She did Valentine, but then I feel like anything else she did.
A brief moment of... She's briefly in Love, Actually, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She's one of the girls that comes back with him, right? The British guy?
Think so. I can't remember that movie enough to know, but yeah, I think
it's her and Carmen Electra. I think that's it.
I have no idea.
I don't
remember.
I've seen that movie. Unfortunately, I mean, the movie's fine. I don't hate it or anything, but my wife loves it. So it's she watches it every year around the holidays. So sometimes I watch it with her, but but it's something like that, yeah. Because I know Eliza Cuthbert's in it too, but I think that's when he's in the States and he's at the bar and he's just talking to people. But I think when he gets back, I think it's Denise Richards and Carmen Electra, but I could be wrong. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Love Actually,
no, probably you're right.
Love Actually is probably better than this movie though. So.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't have a lot else to say. I mean, I don't know. I was kind of surprised. Like, it's really interesting. This has been the first time with Tomorrow Never Dies and this one, I thought I would have the opposite reaction to both. Like, I thought I didn't like Tomorrow Never Dies very much, and maybe I didn't at the time, but it actually, I think it's aged okay. And then this one is just not aged well at all.
Doesn't feel like it. No.
And it's crazy because as hard as they are trying to like do this like in a way that like, they had ideas about the women are going to be better in this one, and all that, and it ended up almost being worse. I don't know how that's possible, but it is. So for our rankings, We are now going to rank this film in 5 different categories. Our scale will be based on something that Bond holds near and dear to his heart, as long as they are shaken and not stirred, and that would be martinis. So for each category, rank from 1 to 5 martinis, 5 being the best damn liquid that has ever passed your lips, 1 being the well liquor you had to settle for or were too drunk to care that night. So as always, our first one is going to be just our overall feeling toward the movie, the story, which we've kind of already said, but what is your actual ranking for that?
I'm gonna give this one a 2 out of 5. Yeah, it's not the worst one I've ever seen. That's The Man with the Golden Gun. This one is definitely better than that movie. It's 2 out of 5.
Yeah,
is what I'll give it.
I don't mean to speak ahead. I'm pretty sure this is not the worst Brosnan film either, but
it is not.
We'll find out. Maybe we'll have a change of heart. We're like, Die the Other Day is awesome.
Guys, seriously, yeah, we got to give this another chance. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm a 2. It's easiest 2 I've ever given. I think since probably For Your Eyes Only, it's probably the easiest 2 I've ever given. This one isn't boring though, which I think is why it's not at the bottom, because there's not. It moves along. You're never just this is so slow,
Yeah.
But it's not very good. The Bond, the performance, the Brosnan. I think this is my least favorite of the 3, and it has a lot to do with how they've written him. I'm still going to give him a 3. I didn't like it as much as I did him in the other 2 that we've watched.
Yeah, Brosnan is he's I don't know. I think the character, yeah. I mean, we are talking about the Bond here.
Yeah.
We're not talking about Brosnan himself.
Exactly.
Brosnan is obviously really good, but yeah, the Bond here does a lot of stupid things that doesn't make any sense to me throughout. I mean, yeah, he's still Bond, but I don't know. There's nothing in here that I want to give this 2.5, I guess. 2.5. Yeah,
that's fair. And also, we didn't really talk about this too much, but I find he seems really sleazy in this one, and that's not something I've really felt. That scene with the doctor at the beginning, which we hadn't even talked about, because he hurts his shoulder in that explosion, and he's trying to get a doctor to clear him for duty, and so he seduces her, and it's just, I don't know,
yeah, that's pretty gross. And then
it didn't feel like it was it made sense in that situation.
Well, and they're also big on I guess they've been a little bit bigger on the double entendre since Brosnan came back, but Cigar Girl comes up and says, "Would you like to check out my figures?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm sure they're well-rounded."
Yeah.
And then, of course, that awful Christmas only comes once a year thing at the very
Always
end.
wanted to have Christmas and turkey.
Yeah, Christmas and turkey, yeah, that type of thing. So, yeah, he does seem a little sleazy in this movie.
Yeah, and the scene, I do like, though, that's one thing about the Cigar Girl, the girl from Il Postino. I do like I like when he makes that comment, though. She looks at him like, fuck you.
Exactly.
So I liked that, but then, it just from there, then they have that scene with the doctor was the weirdest one, though. Brosnan even, looks uncomfortable. He just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it was one of those things where Roger Moore had to shoot that person. Also, there's that one scene too, which it's a bad guy, but he just cold-blooded, he just full-on murders that henchman that's it's the guy that's working with he's with Sophie Marceau. I can't remember what his because Bond's in the trunk. Do you remember this?
Yeah,
the guy opens his trunk, and then he just shoots, he just murders him, right there, and it was just kind of, I don't know, it felt odd, it just didn't feel like something he would have done, he would have knocked him out or something.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was something that seemed that's typical Bond shit to me, but yeah, it could be.
I can't ever explain that. It's just sometimes it feels weirder than others.
He says in this movie that he doesn't shoot people who are unarmed, so maybe because this guy is armed.
Yeah.
Because he's about to kill Carlisle at that one point, and he's like, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to make an exception for you, and so maybe that's how they explain a scene like that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I can't really back it up with anything, so it's fine. The villain henchman we're talking about, we've got Electra, we've got Renard. I mean, that's kind of it. There's that like Robbie Coltrane's got like this like henchman that's in it a little bit, who was like actually like a DJ or something. He was like he's in music, or was then in like the UK music scene. But I don't know. I guess it's mostly just Renard and Elektra. So what is your take on them?
Yeah, I like the attempt at what they did, but I also hate how they build up Renard just to pull the rug out and say, actually it's her, and she has Stockholm syndrome, and she flipped the tables on everybody, and now she's getting revenge on her dad and whatever. I don't know. Something didn't set well with me on that. I'm going to give the villains 2 out of 5.
I'm 2 too, and I hate it because like the idea of like a full-on female villain, I love. Like we were talking about how we wish Barbara Carrera had just been the villain. Amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
But so it sucks when they actually do it and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the gadgets. So we've got like. There's the BMW Z8, which this was the third. I don't know if they comes back, the BMW, but they had that 3-picture deal with BMW. So that was them fulfilling that. That's got some stuff in it. There's the Q boat, which, like you said, I did like the boat, but I didn't like the boat chase. And then I think it's funny, too, because Q even says that it wasn't built for spies. It was just for his retirement. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, they let you like use government money to build.
Yeah,
but I guess it could have been a joke, but it was just weird.
Right.
He's got the Omega watch that shoots a grappling hook, which, by the way, is hilarious the way that scene plays out, because he's just like, she's like, we're trapped, they're closing us off, and he's just like, he says something like, don't worry about it or something, and then he shoots that grappling hook, and it's like so slow. It's like after he says that, and then he's just kind of cruising up to the top, like,
yeah.
And then I guess she's just watching him, I guess. I don't know. And then there's
it doesn't seem like there's really much in the way of gadgets in this. You're naming these, and I'm like, that's right.
The only
That's
other
in
thing
there.
I can think of is the jacket that turns into like a ball, and somehow that it doesn't cause them to be buried in snow, which doesn't make any damn sense.
Yeah, it makes sense either. Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I'm at like a 2 on the gadgets.
Yeah, gadgets are 2.
And then lastly, the Bond song. I got the impression you really like the Bond song.
Yeah, I really like Garbage, and I think that Shirley Manson's voice and their sound really lends itself to Bond themes. It's not like the greatest one that I've ever heard, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
I'm only giving it a 3. It's probably more like a 3.5, because for the simple fact that it's one of the few, I don't remember it like after I hear it. Like I could not sing it to you right now. I'd have to, I mean, I kind of have some of the melody in my head, but like I can't, it's just, it doesn't stick with me. But her voice is great. Like we were talking about last week with Sheryl Crow, where like the lyrics and the music was there, but it was just Sheryl Crow did not fit that song. Whereas here, I think that Shirley Manson very much fits this song, but for whatever reason, musically and lyrically, it just doesn't really stick with me. But because of Garbage, or specifically probably her. In fact, I thought it was just her. I had no idea it was the whole band was involved in that. But But anyways, I'm going to give it a 3. So, yeah. Did you have any other thoughts on this lovely Bond film?
I don't. I know that, with so much going on and so much craziness, we probably like missed some things here and there or whatever. I mean, we just mentioned that doctor scene like towards the end, just barely put that in, but like. Yeah, there's probably a lot of things I didn't quite get in this, because it's one of those where it seems like they come up with an idea and then they don't really fully implement the idea later or whatever. So there's a lot of, maybe they did do more than I thought they did, but after this last viewing, I was like, man, it just seems like there's a lot of promise and not a lot of payoff.
Yeah, and it's not, there's nothing about it that stands out. I can almost guarantee you by like we've got to go through the Craig films, before we're done with this. By the time we get to like Spectre, I'm probably gonna not be able to tell you what happened in World Is Not Enough. Like I give myself 3 weeks and you'd be like, what happens in World Is Not Enough? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I feel that way about a lot of the movies we've already done. So,
that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, that hot air balloon thing, which we kind of touched on, that whole, I don't know why, but I'm just like sitting there thinking, is a hot air balloon really a good escape plan? Like, 'cause I know it was like, at the moment, I don't think it was planned that way, but
no,
but it's like,
that wouldn't have been her plan A.
like escaping on a blimp. Like,
right.
like so slow. But anyways, well, thank you all for joining us this week. We really appreciate it. We hope you will join us again next week. We're going to be talking about, I messed up earlier in the show and said we'd be talking about Casino Royale next week. We do have one more Brosnan though. So we're going to be talking about Die Another Day. Also, before we go, we have social media. You can reach us on Twitter. We are at GoldSpy007. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter. I am at SamLoomis13. You can email us at golddiamonddeath007@gmail.com. And if you like this podcast and other things under the Cinemasins brand, we also have a Patreon you can join at patreon.com/Cinemasins. And if you have a second to leave us a 5-star review at your podcast listening app of choice, we would appreciate it. But we hope you'll join us again when we talk about Die Another Day. Until then, keep the martinis dry and shaken, the Baccarat shoe moving, and the Aston Martin fully gassed. This is Chris Atkinson and Jonathan Watkins signing off, and we will see you next mission.
Thank you.